Alrighty. Hello, people. We are live.
Yay. I had to do it.
Whatever it's worth. Seems a little quiet out there. It's 12 o'clock. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started, just to let some more people join. Looks like we're at about 35 people, but we have not only my class, but also Ms. Hobby's class should be present. So we'll give it just a few more minutes. Hopefully we'll get some more people in here, and then we'll get started. Got about 53 people. All right. Getting up there. See what people have said. Remember, so students can post their questions into the Q&A. You don't have to say your name this time. I know last time I was asking people to type their name into the Q&A, but you don't have to do that. We've got a roster of everybody that comes in and comes out. So I can see how long you were in the chat, or how long you were in the live session, how many times you got disconnected. I can see that. Good to see you, Will. Looks like we're getting about 60 people in here. If it's all right with you guys, I think I'm going to start at 12:05, just to give just a few more minutes for other people to join us here. Gracie, good to see you. Good to see you, Courtney. How's it going, Ella? Hope everybody is doing well from the coronavirus. I think I only know a couple people personally that have been infected, but personally I've survived. I have not gotten infected yet.
Yay.
This is for all level physics classes. Yeah, this is for all on-level physics classes. So not just mine, but also Ms. Hobbies, and I believe Mr. Registers as well will be in here. Courtney, the exam remediation is only for those that failed the previous exam. So if you made below a 75, you can do the exam remediation online, and you can bump your grade up to a 75. So since we can't do any retests, we're just doing it that way. And if you need a remediation for exam 1 earlier in the semester, I'll post something for that as well as needed. 74 people. It's a good bit of kids. I think it's about time to get started. Nina, I can't believe we're actually going to learn a lesson from you. Yeah? Yep. Believe it or not, I am an actual teacher. Gracie, your questions are going into the Q&A, and we can see your questions. We just don't always publish all of them. Okay, so I'm going to leave the questions to Miss Allie and Miss Hobby and whoever else is moderating. I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Coach Weaver.
And Coach Weaver. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint? You guys can see it moving? Weaver? Bobby?
Yes.
Okay. So let's get started. Quick recap on atoms. Atoms are made up of 3 subatomic particles: protons, neutrons, and electrons. So the most important part about this when it comes to electricity is that protons are positive and they don't move when electricity is flowing. Electrons are negatively charged and they do move. So they're the flow of electrons here. So in static electricity, it was an exchange of electrons sitting on some sort of insulator. When it comes to current electricity, it is the flow of electrons flowing from a positive to a negative direction. We'll get into that more in a second. So there are 3 main types of materials. They're also superconductors, but we'll get to that later, maybe. The main ones are conductors, which allow electrons to flow very, very easily. Insulators, which cause electrons to sit still. This is what is really good for static electricity. And then semiconductors, which do allow electrons to flow, but not as well as a normal conductor. They're somewhere in between an insulator and a conductor. So they can be really useful in electrical or different applications that we'll get to later in the semester. We'll see. So quick recap on resistance as well. We talked about resistance last week. Resistance is the measure of how difficult it is for a current to flow. Basically, you can think of resistance as the friction of electricity, pushback on electrons, slowing those electrons down. The higher the value of the resistance, the harder it is for electrons to flow. So the higher your resistance, the slower those electrons are going to move, or the harder time it has for those electrons to flow. So we represent resistance with an omega, or ohms is what the units are called. So if you have a resistor of 10,000 ohms, that is its resistance, 10,000 ohms. We can represent resistors as a squiggly line, like this guy, or as a box, which usually has the resistance value inside of the box, if it's known. So there are 2 main types of current. So there is conventional current and electron current. Now, electron current is the direction that electrons flow. So as we know, electrons are negatively charged, and they like to move away from a negative direction and go into a positive direction. That is the flow of electrons. They go from negative charges to the positive charge. You can see that little arrow direction. So that's the way that the electrons actually flow in a circuit. However, conventional current, this is the way that people used to think electricity flows through a circuit. They used to think that it goes from positive to negative, that a positive charge would travel to the negative direction. This is still widely accepted, and anytime you talk about current, they're usually talking about conventional current, or the direction from positive to negative in the for the flow. So if somebody asks you what is the direction that the current is flowing, you'll use the conventional current rather than the electron flow. So basically, current is a measurement, or is measured as the direction that positive charge flows. In reality, electrons flow from negative to positive. There's a little description there for you. The direction of current, positive to negative, flow of electrons, negative to positive. So here's just a little mathematical representation of current. We won't actually use this formula for current, which is charge divided by time. But if you want to understand where amps comes from, which is the unit of current, this is kind of how it was derived. So current is how long it takes those electrons to flow. So coulombs is a negative charge, or the charge of an electron, and time, of course, is in seconds. And so current is how long it takes those electrons to flow, hence charge over time. Now, once again, we're not going to be using that formula, but this is where amps comes from. So anytime we talk about current, we're going to be using these units, amps. Okay. So there are two types of current, direct current and alternating current. Now, I just want to introduce this because the electricity that comes from your wall or your house is very different than the electricity that you use in your phone or like your TV remote. Typically, your TV remote or your phone uses this DC voltage or DC current, direct current, whereas your house has alternating current, which is a changing voltage over time. So it increases and decreases as time passes, whereas your battery has a single current that's flowing through it, or a single value. DC is much safer than AC. Of course, people like, can die from messing around with electricity from your house. There's not many people, get hurt from like a DC or a 9-volt battery. Of course, it really depends on the voltage, but AC is much more dangerous than DC. So if you were to zoom in on a circuit, this is kind of what the flow of electrons looks like. So right now, with no electrons flowing, they're just moving around casually. This is called constant motion or constant thermal motion. They move in all sorts of direction. This is a wire, of course, and these little dots are electrons. So right now you can see they're all pointing in different directions. So no electricity is flowing right now. But when you hook it up to a battery, you now create this electric field in a very specific direction. So this arrow and the E over here is the direction of the electric field. So when that happens, all those electrons feel the electric field. And so they all start accelerating in that direction. So you see how they all change direction, and now they're all pointing in the direction of the electric field. As that happens, as they start to flow with the electric field, they start bumping into different atoms in the wire. So depending on what the wire is made out of, has a different resistance. That is what resistance is those electrons bumping into the material of the wire. And of course, depending on what that wire is made of, it has a different amount of resistance. So kind of think of that like a path that people are working on. If it's a really crowded road, then the electrons are going to move a lot slower. But if it's wide and clear, then electrons will flow a lot easier. So let's move on to electric potential energy. So potential energy, we learned last semester, was like stored energy, right? Well, we also have that in electricity. Electric potential energy is a stored charge, basically. So electrical potential energy is the potential energy of these charge carriers due to their position in a circuit. and it's measured in joules. Now, we won't really mess around with electric potential energy that much, but I do want to introduce it so that you have an understanding of how voltage works, because you can't understand voltage without electrical potential energy. As electrons are forced away from the negative terminal to the positive terminal, potential energy is converted into different forms of energy. So as those electrons are flowing from the negative to the positive, they're flowing from the negative to the positive charge. They change that energy into light or heat. So depending on what's in the circuit, you can get a different type of energy converted. So the battery is that stored potential energy, and as they leave one side of the battery and go to the other side of the battery, they're changing their potential energy into other things like light for a light bulb, or heat, which is why your battery heats up or your phone heats up when you use it a lot. Once again, converted into different forms like thermal energy. I kind of already said this. So voltage is the difference in that electric potential energy. So the difference between the negative and the positive charge is the voltage that is in the battery. So basically a 12-volt battery or a 9-volt battery is the electrical potential energy difference between the positive and the negative side of the battery. Now typically we'll just represent this as volts. So a 9-volt battery is that difference in charge, and we just say 9 volts. So that's the energy that the circuit has. Here's another mathematical representation of voltage. Once again, you won't use this formula. This is the energy in the circuit divided by the charge. So basically, voltage is how much energy it takes to move an electron from one place to another. That is the definition of voltage. How much energy it takes to move an electron, hence energy divided by charge. Now, how do you measure voltage in a circuit? Well, we use these things called a voltmeter. A voltmeter, all you have to do is hook it up to your circuit. So if this is a little resistor right here, or maybe a light bulb, you hook up your voltmeter, this guy, to where one side, the negative charge, is on here, and the positive charge is on here. Notice that you didn't actually have to take the circuit apart to put the voltmeter into it. You just kind of put it onto one side of the resistor and on the other side of the resistor, and then you can read the voltage from that circuit. This is actually called putting it into parallel. We'll get into that later. You can also measure current with an ammeter. Ammeters, you just hook up directly into the circuit. Notice how this guy is actually part of that circuit, whereas earlier for voltage, it wasn't actually integrated into the circuit. It was just on the outside. So ammeters read the amps or the current coming from your circuit. So if you imagine hooking it up, you have the black side usually always represents the negative side, and the red side usually always represents the positive side. So we have the negative side hooked up directly into the amp or the ammeter, and then coming out of the positive side, and that will read you how many amps or the current coming from your circuit. So this guy, this is kind of a drawing of what it really looks like. Whereas this is a circuit schematic that we'll be using to represent electricity. Sorry, my phone is blowing up right now. Of course, here it is with a voltmeter instead. Notice we didn't have to break the circuit. We just connected it directly to it. Same thing as this guy. I know circuits may not make a whole lot of sense right now, but if you later in the presentation, we'll get into building circuits. Ms. Hobby will take over for that. So let's talk about Ohm's law. This is a formula that we will be using in this unit. So resistance can actually be found by dividing your voltage by the current. So this is called Ohm's law. Ohm's law tells us our resistance of a circuit, or the resistance of a substance, based on the voltage going across it and the current going across it. So if you know the voltage and the current reading, you can find the resistance of a material. Now you can take that formula and you can turn it into to solve for voltage, or you can use it to solve for current, depending on what information you have. So you can rearrange the same formula into 3 different formulas. Now, some people use this little triangle method. I'm not personally a big fan of the triangle, but I did want to share it just in case you wanted to use it. So this is voltage divided by current will give you resistance, or current times resistance will give you voltage. Okay, so just another representation of Ohm's law. The greater the resistance in a circuit, the less current can flow. So the higher your resistance, the lower your current is. Electrons can't flow as fast if there's a high resistance, and that's shown using that formula. So if you were to plot your line right here, as the voltage increases, your current can increase, but as your resistance increases, your current drops. So here's a little mathematical calculation for you. So if we're trying to find current, but we have our voltage here, 30 volts, and our resistance of 10,000 ohms, also known as 10 kilo ohms, all we have to do is go back to our formula here, right here. Current equals voltage divided by resistance. So all we have to do is take that. We divide 30 by 10,000, and that gives us 0.003 amps. So that is our current that's flowing. Of course, we can change this into 3 milliamps if we wanted to. So finding current, all you had to do was 30 volts divided by your 10,000 ohm resistance. Now, what if you have your current of 2 amps and a 9-volt battery in your circuit? How can we find the resistance of this resistor? Well, that's not too hard. All you have to do is divide 9 volts by 2 amps. Just like we had our formula earlier, resistance equals voltage divided by current. So that's 9 volts divided by 2 amps, giving us 4.5 ohms of resistance. So this resistor right here would be 4.5 ohms. And that's really all there is to it for Ohm's law. It's not too complicated. And one more thing, I'm gonna kind of rush through this a little bit because I don't want to take up too much time, but power is how much energy is being converted into one other thing. So if you think about a light bulb is converting electrical potential energy into light energy, right? Well, we can figure out how much energy is being converted, or how fast that energy is being converted, by calculating the power. So the brighter that light, the higher the power in the current, or in the circuit. So power is really just defined as the energy being converted over time. Now, we won't actually use this formula. This we were supposed to see last semester, but I don't think we really got into power, because power can be is any energy converted over time. So potential energy, like gravitational potential energy or elastic potential energy, we could have found the power in those situations. Here we can find the power in a circuit as well. Now there's a simpler way for us to find power. We can actually convert this earlier formula directly into power equaling voltage times current. So this is a more useful formula for us since we'll typically use voltage in current rather than energy in time. So power is the voltage times the current in the circuit. So if we wanted to calculate that, all we'd have to do is know our voltage, let's say 9 amps, and our current 0.5 amps, I'm sorry, 9 volts, and our current is 0.5 amps. So we just multiply those two together and we have a power of 4.5 watts. That means the energy being converted by the lamp is about 4.5 watts. Now, if we do know the power in a light bulb, so often when you replace your light bulbs, it says like 80 watts or 120 watts. That's the power that that light bulb draws from your wall. Well, if you also know that you have it hooked up to a 120 volt system, so that's 80 watts of power and 120 volts of electricity, how can you find the current in your circuit? Well, that's not too hard. We can rearrange our formula so that it says power or current equals power divided by voltage. So all we had to do here was divide both sides by voltage, and we brought it to the other side. And now we just divide 80 by 120 volts, and that gives us about 0.667 amps, also known as 667 milliamps. So, Nasabi, I'll let you take it over from here. Unless somebody has questions over what I just covered.
We're actually going to switch to Mr. Register quickly to review last week's quiz for a moment.
Yeah, please.
And go over a little bit of our last bit of electrostatics before we finish the circuits today.
There we go. All right, can y'all hear me all right? Let's see. I'll try to share my whiteboard here. Can y'all see this whiteboard? Can anybody hear me?
No, we can't.
Mr. Register, we can hear you, but we cannot see the whiteboard.
Can't see the whiteboard. Okay, let me see. That's the desktop. Share. Here we go. How about now? Can y'all see that? There we go. Okay, I see. Yeah, cool. So the big thing that people seem to have an issue with was the full procedure for figuring out the charge the charge of an object where you don't know what it is. So the quiz question was asking, so if you have a rag here and you rub it on one rod, we know that it's going to give you a positive charge. So this would give it an overall positive charge. So it is positively charged, which means that it doesn't just have only positive charges. It does mean that there's more positive charges than negative charges. So over here, we've got an imbalance of charges. The other part of the question was, well, if we take this rag here and rub it on this rod, we know that it's going to give a negative charge. So it's going to have both positives and negative charges, but it's going to have more negatives than positives. So I've represented that over here. So this has a net positive charge, and then the one over here has a net negative again, because it's got more negatives than positives, or in the case of the other one over here, more positives than negatives. And so it's like the setup. And so the question then is, if we take this rag and rub it on this rod, how can we determine what the charge on this rod is? So say, we used the triboelectric series to determine that this was positively charged and this is negatively charged. But say this object here is not on our triboelectric series, so we can't just look at the chart and figure it out. So if we rub this rag here and give this a charge, there are the most effective way would be to see which of these rods is going to repel this one here. So if we rub this here on that one, and it makes it a overall positively charged. Okay. Select red, you can do it. There we go. So if it makes it overall positively charged, so more positives than negatives, and you bring this rod, you bring these two rods together, so you like take this one. Let's see if it'll let me drag all of that. Oh, guess not. So so if you take this rod here and move it over here, what they're going to want to do is repel. So this rod's going to be pushed this way, and this rod's going to be pushed this way. And the only way that they repel is if the charges, if the net charge is the same. The reason why we don't necessarily want to use attraction, and this is going a little bit off of what the quiz was asking, but I wanted to explain, like, why is it that repelling is more a better way to figure this out than attracting, is because let's say that you do rub this on your object, but let's say it's not effective and the object remains neutral, which again is not what the quiz said, but this kind of again goes more into why we want to use repulsion as opposed to attraction. So let's take the hypothetical that you take this rag, you rub it on the rod, it doesn't really change the charge, and you don't know that. So you don't know that it has a neutral charge. Well, the thing is that yes, this is a neutral charge, but that doesn't mean no charges, it means balance. So there are negative charges here as well as positives. So if you take this net positive charge rod here and you bring it close to the neutral rod, it's not going to do nothing. What it will do is that these two rods will attract because there's more positive charges over here than negatives, so this positive charge is going to attract to all the negative charges, and so forth. This one's going to attract to all of those, okay, and so on and so forth. So even though there will be some repulsion between the positive charges in this rod and the positive charges in this rod, overall it's not enough to cancel out this overall attraction. So even though this is neutrally charged, it's still going to be attracted to a positively charged rod. And so the same is true. Let's see if I can get rid of this thing. Yeah. So the same is true for the net negative. If I take this neutral rod and I hold it up to the neutral, if I take this negative charge and hold it up to the neutral rod, it's the same idea. This negative charge is going to be attracted to all the positive charges, just like the other one. And so even though there are negative charges in the neutral rod, like the other example, it's not enough repulsion to overcome this attraction. So all of that to say that attraction can mean two things. It can mean opposite charges, but it can also mean one is charged, one is neutral. And so that's why, in general, looking at repulsion is more definitive, especially if you don't know if you've actually made a charge. Now, I've not been watching the chat. Are there any questions that I need to, I can see it here now, are there any questions that I need to address from people? All right, so that's that was the primary part of the quiz. Again, if there are other questions on that, you can post them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer. So y'all can go, unless there's anything else you wanted me to go over, Ms. Hobby or Mr. Smith, we can go ahead and move on to the next section.
Ms. Hobby, you want to take over?
Sure, yeah. I'm going to see if I can trying to see if I can, I was hoping to be able to do your dual screen. So Mr. Smith, if you know how to switch it so that we can take.
I think if you click, there's a little, there you go.
Thank you. All right, so when we look at this PowerPoint, we are going to scroll back down to where we left off, and it was the introduction to circuits. So we talked about Ohm's law and the relationship between current, voltage, and resistance, and now we want to see that current, voltage, and resistance in a design or a schematic. So let's start with basic circuit structure. If we look at a circuit and our overall drawing, we're going to see our batteries, our source of voltage. We're going to see our light bulbs, and our light bulbs are acting as our resistors here. And of course, we have the current moving through our wire. So on our left-hand side of the screen, we see a drawing of the circuit, and the right is our schematic. And when we're talking about a schematic, we're simply talking about a way to symbolize the parts of our circuit. It's just a universal sort of drawing for circuitry. So when we look at the schematic key, you're going to see the multiple dashed lines show us the battery. You're going to see the connecting wire, and then the resistor, or in our case we just saw, our light bulbs were acting as our resistors. We won't be going into switches much today, but an open switch is simply having that wire disconnected, and the switch closed allows the current to move through the wire without any sort of it just allows it to flow. So we have a couple of different kinds of circuits that we're going to be talking about this week and next. Today's focus is going to be on a series circuit. Now I have, it's left open on question 1 with the circuit to the left is A. It is a series circuit, but what I want one of you to please do in our Q&A session is, what do you think makes this a series circuit? Why is it called a series circuit? So we're going to just pause for a moment. I'm going to allow you to type in and tell me why you think it's a series circuit. And if I could have Coach or Miss Allie, first person, let's say the first 3 people, we're going to give out some Sparta bucks today.
Can you repeat your question one more time, Ms. Hobby?
We're asking why this is a series. I'm telling you it's a series circuit. What about the design of this based on the schematic makes you think it justifies the calling it a series? And while you're typing, when we look at the schematic, we see 12 volts at our power source. Our battery is a 12-volt battery, and we see 10 ohms as the resistance along our circuit. The total resistance in this series circuit would be 30 ohms. Coach Weaver, Miss Allie, anybody had a chance to give us a response? Well,
Yes, the first three were Megan Malone, Maya Hassler, and where'd it go? James Montesi.
all right.
But
What
his
was
went away.
James's justification? Oh, James's
Well,
went away?
James didn't say anything. He just said he was here.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it was at the bottom of it, because he had several other questions, but his said because it was one. That's what he said.
Okay, so when you're looking at a series circuit, you're looking at one right after the other in one continuous pathway. So there's no branching, it's one right after the other. Now, the other type of circuit we'll be discussing next week, or adding in next week with Ohm's law, will be a parallel circuit where you see the current branching. So a series circuit, it's one right after the other. Just like most of us this past week with Netflix watching a series, it shows that next episode right after the other within a series. So that's how I think about a series circuit. So let's try a little bit of fill in the blank with circuitry using some of the words I've got here. And again, we're going to give out some Sparta bucks for students who can answer. I'll go ahead and say the movement of a charge is called. What is the movement of a charge called? From our word bank of circuit, current, parallel, schematic, and series. The movement of a charge is called. The movement of a charge. Anybody in our Q&A yet?
All right, Miss Hobby. So Jasmine Norman, she said it's called current. William Hopkins also said the same thing.
All right,
We
so
have
the
two.
movement of a charge is called our current. That is correct. For our second one, it says, a blank is a complete path for a current to flow. A blank is a complete path for a current to flow. We're down to circuit, parallel, schematic, and series.
Will Hopkins says circuit. Daniel
Thank you,
Simmons
Will.
says circuit, and Francesca says circuit. Good job.
All right, our third one, the two types of circuits are, and we introduced this at the very beginning, the two types of circuits are blank, which has one pathway, and blank, which has two or more pathways. Which circuit has one pathway? Which circuit has two pathways?
Ethan and James both say series and parallel in that order.
All right, series and then parallel. And process of elimination, we know that a schematic is a diagram using symbols to represent circuit elements or the parts of a circuit. So
Ms.
if
Hobby.
you will, yes, sir.
Can I interject real quick?
Absolutely.
So a lot of folks are writing or saying schematic. Guys, a schematic is like the blueprint or the picture of the circuit, okay? a schematic is like the picture of the circuit or the blueprint. Series circuit, guys, is again is like one path for electricity to follow, and parallel circuit are multiple paths for electricity to follow. Okay, schematic is just the blueprint. It won't describe how the electricity is flowing. It shows how it's flowing, but it's not gonna tell you whether it's a series or a parallel circuit.
If you'll allow me to hop in, I've got a couple of pictures up that can help show that difference of like what a schematic is versus like what the purpose is, if that's all right.
Go for it.
All right, let me pull back here, go back into my whiteboard. Of course. No, whiteboard. There we go, new project. Link.
We're also going to be doing a comparison of the circuitry and schematics using a PhET lab in just a moment, and we will we have several resources posted on Teams as well.
Cool. Schematic. There we go. So let me switch over to where you can see my screen. Share whiteboard. There, so y'all can see that now?
No, sir.
Okay. Oh, yes, I want to share. Now you can see it. Okay, so the schematic is just an easy, quick way to represent circuits. Because imagine that if you wanted to represent a circuit and you had to like physically draw a battery and a bulb each time, that and not everybody's going to draw batteries the same way, not everybody's going to draw bulbs the same way. So thinking of it as a blueprint is a really great analogy, because imagine trying to build a house with a bunch of pictures like I've got right here. Like, you couldn't really do it, and everybody's going to draw it differently. So the schematic is just a quick and easy way for us to represent circuits in a way that everybody agrees on. So, here's our battery right there, and then we've got our bulb. If it will click, there we go. And so then we've got our bulb right here. So again, it's just it's like shorthand. It's like an abbreviation for an actual circuit. That's all. I will end and, oh, no, cancel. All right, if you want to pick it back up, stop sharing. There we go. And Ms. Hobby's coming back on. There we go.
So if we look at finishing out our last question was simply looking at a series circuit and drawing the schematic, that universal diagram of it to the right of it. So I'm going to simply use, and I've already answered what kind of circuit is this. This is a series circuit, and we had a student earlier, several students actually, give us an explanation of why it's a series, because it's one continuous path the current is following. So I'm going to take a pen here, and I'm simply going to diagram out what and of course my lovely pen here. This is how I write on the board anyhow, for those of y'all that know me. So I've shown my resistors, 3 in a row with the light bulbs. I have my wire coming around, and I have my voltage source, my battery at the front. And it's one continuous path. Little bit helter-skelter there on the edge, but one continuous wire carrying the voltage through with our 3 resistors or 3 light bulbs. right, I'm going to switch us over now to looking at a PhET drawing. This PhET lab is open for you as well on your Nearpods that we've shared. So give me just a moment. Can't quite seem to get the link to show up. Give me just a moment. We are still live, just trying to get our sources back. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for jumping in while I get the content up.
While we're trying to get that, guys, do y'all have any questions, any clarifications, what we just went over?
No, Zamari, if you've already done the Nearpod, you don't have to redo it. In fact, I don't encourage you to do the Nearpod right now while we're going over it, especially because it's already got a couple quizzes in there that you have to work on.
Unfortunately, stop sharing. Is it possible? I'm struggling getting my content back up for, here we go.
There you go, Miss Abby. You got it.
Thank you. So when we look at this PhET lab, and you all have access to this, like I said, through the Nearpod, and it's also on one of the videos we shared on Teams for you, we have wire, batteries, light bulbs, and then switches and resistors. So let's just build a very simple circuit using a battery and connected pieces of wire, just like if anyone has ever played with their Christmas lights at Christmas time and had to be responsible for replacing bulbs if your strand has gone out. If you have a strand of lights that go out completely, if one bulb is out, you're looking at a series. So when I connect my wires at the end, what do I see happen? I see my light bulb turn on, and I see the movement of the current through the wire, through the resistor, and back to my battery. This is a closed series circuit. I'm going to take this closed series circuit and I'm going to convert it over to a schematic, and I'll see the same direction of current flow. I see the same wires, resistor or my light bulb, and my voltage or power source here with the battery. If I take my ammeter out, I see my current is 9 amps from the resistor to my battery. And I see it's, 0.9 amps. It's also 0.9 amps coming out of my battery. So we have our amperage staying the same throughout. If we go through and add, let me cut this. If we go through and add another light bulb, I still have my current moving through. And what happened? What do I notice happening? Happened to the amps moving through my wire. If someone will type in a response, what do you notice happening to the current moving through the wire? When I add a second light bulb or resistor.
It went down. Carefully,
Yes, and
you see the
we
went
actually,
down.
when we see it go down, we actually saw it go down by half. Adding the resistor, adding the second light bulb, made the current go down by half. So it is sharing the current. It's sharing the voltage, excuse me, going through the wire. What do you think would happen to the brightness of the bulbs by adding that second bulb? If my current has decreased, what's going to happen to the brightness?
James said it divided in half.
That's true. So if we had the current divided in half.
Anonymous said they dim. Leah Davis said they will be dimmer.
Both of you are correct. Thank you both. And James as well for pointing out that it did take the current and split the current in half. All right, so you have this VET lab to go through, and you can use the voltmeter. You can look at the movement of the electrons from, let's cut this here, through our battery and back through our circuit. And you can start, if you like, building parallel circuits and adding branches. We'll be doing that next week in class. So I want to just do a quick recap of the resources we have for our week coming up. And I want to just go ahead and see if we can close out our lesson today. So resources we have available. Coach or Alan, if you'll take a second and recap what we've posted on Teams and what we expect for next week, prior to next week's lesson.
I'm sorry, Ms. Hop. I was answering questions on the Q&A. What do you want?
Just the closing out our lesson today and resources we have available next week. What we need finished by next week.
All right. So, guys, today's lesson. Just make sure you guys understand that series circuit against one path. It's one path. Ohm's law formula. It's a big formula for this unit. V equals I times R. Please know that the I in that formula also equals amps. Okay. Some folks do get confused with I and A. You'll see them both, but the I in that formula is your amps and your current. Okay. So make sure you understand that formula. There's a Nearpod in everyone's classes. Make sure you get to that Nearpod. If you need the code, please comment or message. I've given the code out to a couple people so far already. For Mr. Smith class, I don't have his code, so make sure ask Mr. Smith for the code for your class if you need the Nearpod. There are quizzes. Yes.
If you don't mind me, my class, just go into your assignments in Teams, and there's a link in there. All you have to do is go to assignments, go to the Nearpod, and you can just click on it. It'll take you straight to your classes.
Go upstairs, buddy. Hold on. Excuse me, I'm sorry, my son kind of. Can someone take over, please? I gotta.
Sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, the main thing is you have your resources on Teams. We are all available via messaging chat or email. Reach out to us anytime if you have questions while you're going through the Nearpod, or before the quiz if you preview the quiz and have a few questions, because there is a quiz on Teams right now. We actually have Mr. Smith willing to hold on for a little while and answer some questions. But that is the end of any new content, and we'll be recapping, of course, at the beginning of next week's lesson and introducing drawing of parallel circuits and actually doing calculations with Ohm's law. So, Mr. Smith, I'm going to send it to you and wish everyone a good afternoon.
All right, I'm up. Sorry, Miss Hobby's class, you have to stare at my face if you want to hang out. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about the lesson for today, or if you have any questions in general for me, I'm happy to answer them. I'll be here until 2, so ask anything you guys want, as long as it's school appropriate, of course. Where's my cat? Cat's over there on the bed. I'll grab her in a bit. All right, good, James. I'm glad you got everything. So what homework do we have for next class? All right, so your homework for this week, at least for my class, I believe from Ms. Hobbies as well, is the Nearpod. That's in the assignments, as well as the quiz for this week. I believe I named my quiz this week is week 1 Teleschool quiz. So that's what you have due today. Okay, Ryan? Or at least due for this week. Take as long as you need with it, but make sure you get it done by midnight next week. So I'm sure a lot of you guys saw I put the grades in a little early for the quiz from last week. That's okay, as long as you still got it done by midnight, I still gave you full credit for it. Now, if you do it now, it is considered late, so if you haven't completed the quiz yet, do it. Does the length of a series circuit change the amount of current? Yeah, absolutely. Not significantly, but it does. Remember, the length of a current changes, or the length of a circuit changes the resistance. The longer a circuit is, the higher the resistance. Now, if you think about it, wires don't have a whole lot of resistance because they're conductors. And so typically we'll just consider the resistance of a wire as 0. But the longer that wire is, the higher the resistance. So in reality, yes, your current will change with a longer circuit, but not by a whole lot if it's just a simple circuit. Now, if you think about your electrical wires or the telephone poles, those super long wires, the longer they are, the higher the resistance, and so you lose electricity as that energy travels through the circuit. How's my quarantine going? I'm just hanging out. Gone to the store a couple times, went for a run, social distancing run. You don't see the quiz under assignments. Will, Miss Hobby is in charge of yours, right? So I'm not sure how she's handling that. Send her an email if you still can't find it. Maya, you want to Sparta bucks you have? Let me see. PBIS, words. Let me see if I can even log on them. It's been a while. Hang on. Give me a second, Maya. Jeez, okay, I get it. Maya, you have 215 Sparta bucks. Nina, do you miss me being the only participant in homeroom? We don't really do homeroom anymore, so sure. Maya, if you have a 0 for a quiz, send me an email letting me know what quiz it was, and I'll see if I can find a alternative for you. Daniel, do I know if final exams will still happen? Honestly, I have no idea. I have no idea if the final exams will still happen. I'm assuming we'll have something of a final exam, but I don't know what it'll look like yet. I don't know what'll be on it. It should be cumulative still, everything that we cover in Teleschool as well as things that we covered before we left. We'll probably have more information on the finals after spring break, Daniel. So just hold tight for that. Sarah. Okay, so the electrostatic quiz was from last week. Week 1 Teleschool quiz is for this week. Does that make sense? Look at the due dates. I know that was kind of a weird naming, but ideally it was Teleschool Week 1 quiz was over the material we covered for Teleschool Week 1. If you pass the quiz, you don't need to do the light thing. Okay, Musa, if you passed the light exam with a 75 or above, then you don't have to do the remediation. That's all that was asking. So the light quiz or the light test remediation is only for people that failed the exam. Maya, chill out. I'll post the new Spartabuck store soon, okay? You put a grade in called both. Are you talking about the grade book? Let me take a look at the grade book. Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're talking about, Sarah. All right, I'll go back. I'll change it. All right, electrostatic quiz. That's the name in Infinite Campus now. All right. So the quiz in the grade book right now in Infinite Campus for last week's quiz is just called electrostatic quiz now. Hopefully that clears that up. So this week's quiz in Teams is called Week 1 Teleschool quiz. Yes, technically this is week 2, but it's over the material for week 1. I won't do that naming system. Leave it. Leave it. Dogs. Hopefully that clears things up. Maya, does this help? It says Spartabuck store. It's on my to-do list. You're welcome, Sarah. Sorry for the confusion. If you guys want to see the cat, I'll get the cat. Come here, Soupy Doop. Come here, Soupy Doop. There you go. This is Soup. She is black and fluffy. What exam? Musa, okay. The electrostatic quiz was the quiz from last week. The light exam remediation is for the people that failed the light exam during the actual school year. Like, I don't know, when was the light exam? A few weeks or several weeks ago? Actually, don't ill my cat. So Musa, you have last week's quiz called Electrostatics Quiz. Then we have this week's quiz called Week 1 Teleschool Quiz. You also, if you failed, and you know what, Musa, I'm just going to check now to see if you even have to worry about it. Musa, you don't have to worry about the light remediation. You did fine on the exam, so you're fine. Okay, good. Sarah, yes, you can still redo quizzes with Sparta Bucks. I'm reconsidering the store Sparta Bucks because we won't have as many opportunities to give out Sparta Bucks. I just have to think about new ways to deal with that. So I'll put out something next week on how much redoing a quiz is, other ways you can earn Sparta Bucks. Participation is definitely going to earn you Sparta Bucks. I already have a list of people that were responding for today for Sparta Bucks. So the more you do, the more Sparta Bucks you'll earn, and you can still use those to redo quizzes. So don't worry about that. Tammy, thank you. I love my cat too. She's about 7 years old now. I've had her since her birth. I watched her from the womb. Dog, leave the cat alone. You know, you wonder why you get hit. It's because she swipes at you when you get too close. She still doesn't mind. Once again, I'm here if you have any questions about physics, life, animals, corona. Samara, yes, I miss tennis a lot. Tennis practice was some of the highlights of my week, so not being able to coach kind of sucks. But you know what? I play tennis mentally now, okay? And I coach mentally. What were the answers to the quiz from last week? Register explained a lot, but never really said the answers, I feel like. Okay, so basically the answers to last week's quiz was, number one asked, okay, so if something gains electrons, it gains a negative charge. So it said that you rub the fur against a plastic rod, I want to say. I think it was plastic. So if you rub fur against plastic, the plastic gains a negative charge. Therefore, it gained electrons. Now, when you rubbed the fur against the glass rod and the glass became positively charged, that means the fur gained electrons. And so the fur was negatively charged. Now the unknown, the idea was that you were supposed to charge the unknown rod with the fur, and then try putting it close to the plastic rod, which was negative, or the glass rod, which was positive, and see if it attracted or repelled one of them. So if it attracts one of them, then it could be an opposite charge. But like Register said, it could be neutral as well. Now, if it repelled one of them, that means it is the same charge as that. So basically, I gave credit if you said something about attract or repelling. And I actually posted all my comments on your quiz. So I think if you go back to it, you'll be able to review what I said. What breed is my dog? She is considered some mix of a Carolina dog. She kind of looks like a dingo. Maya, does that answer your question? Ashley, do I miss Sierra, Taylor, and your table? How do you know what you got wrong in the quiz? Tell you what, Maya, I can pull it up right now. Fourth period. You should be able to go back and look at it. I posted a bunch of comments on everybody's, on all the wrong answers. So try going back into your quiz from the electrostatic quiz, see if you can look at the feedback. But I can just pull yours up now, Maya. Oh, it was a rubber rod. So it wasn't a plastic rod, it was a rubber rod that became negatively charged. So you got that part right, but you said the glass rod gained electrons, but the glass rod was positively charged, so it actually lost electrons. So you just said, how does the rod react? I was really looking for specifically what does it do? Does it attract or repel? Now, I think I actually gave you credit for that part, Maya, but you missed one of the previous ones. Let's see if there's a better way to leave feedback then. You can always just send me an email and ask what you got wrong. So basically, you said the glass rod gained electrons, which it became positively charged, so it actually lost electrons. All right, I'll get the dog. Bye, Sue. Enjoy the bed. Come here, puppy. Here she is. Here's Biscuit. Will I say hi to my friend in... Oh, to your friend in New York. Hello, Nina's friend in New York. When I clicked on it, it says not accepting responses. Okay. I'll see if there's a better way I can leave feedback for your quizzes, because if you can't see the feedback, there's no point. I'll see if there's a better way to do that, Jasmine. Grace, how do we know if an object gains or loses electrons? Okay, so basically, if you want to know if you gain or lose electrons, if you gain electrons, you gain a negative charge. If you lose electrons, you get a positive charge. Now, that in itself, you can't do anything about, but you did have the rubber rod, which was negatively charged, and you had the glass rod, which was positively charged. All you had to do was take the unknown rod, charge it with the fur, and then put it close to both of the rods. If it is attracted to one of them, then it's this opposite charge. If it's repelled by one of them, it's the opposite charge or it's the same charge as that rod. So basically, you could have taken the unknown and the glass rod, put them next to each other. If they repel, then they're the same charge. If they attract, they're opposite charges. And then do the same for the glass rod. That is how you were supposed to check. So Maya, you got a 66 because it was each question was worth 2 points. Now I gave some partial credit, so some people got like 3 out of 6, or some people got 5 out of 6, some people got 6 out of 6. It just means that you missed one question. Biscuit's a good dog. She is a puppy, okay? She's still young. She's like 1.5 years or something like that. Grace, yeah, I mean, it depends on what the material is, but if you don't know the material, then you can't use that as justification. So if I just give you some random material and you're like, well, I don't know what this is, you can try to charge it using the fur, and whether it attracts or repels another object of a known charge, then that's how you can tell the charge on it. Now, it doesn't necessarily tell you what the material is, like if it's silk or amber or something like that, but you do have a little bit more understanding of it if you can determine whether it's charged by a certain material. If you put Spartabucks on your quiz, it would get you 5 out of 6. It's okay. Yeah, all you have to do is, I mean, you can add a point to it if you want. That'll get you 5 out of 6 points. And once again, I'm gonna reconsider the points. Jasmine, you want to know how many Spartabucks you have? Jasmine, you have 6 right now. 6 Spartabucks. But once again, I'm going to be giving different opportunities to get Spartabucks. I'll keep it in mind, and I'll readjust the store since there aren't as many opportunities to get points. Daniel, yes, I will be looking at the Nearpod. It's not graded for accuracy, but I am going to be making sure that everybody participated. So it'll be a participation grade. Take that, please. Where's your toy? Go get your toy. Go get your toy. Go get it. Uh, 129. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Go get it. The Nearpod quiz. Tell you what there were a couple quizzes on Nearpod. Which one were you struggling with, Brandon? Were you struggling with the power calculations or with the resistance calculations or Ohm's law calculations? Which one of those were you having trouble with? Because I can go over either one. Wow, that's good. Go get it. Go get it. Okay, first of all, my dog isn't slow. She's just uncooperative. She's tossing her toy around right now. She's a real smart pup. The first quiz. Okay, so that was Ohm's law calculations. So I can go over that again. Let me just share my PowerPoints. So these won't be the exact same questions, but they will be similar. And I can just make up questions as needed as well. So of course, Ohm's law is resistance equals voltage divided by current, right? Can you guys see? Oh, shoot. Okay, here you go. So Ohm's law is resistance equals voltage divided by current. And you can rearrange that formula into solving for voltage, which is current times resistance, or current equals voltage divided by resistance. So this same formula can be rearranged 3 different ways. So if we were to try and solve something, we need to know 2 out of the 3 parts. So this one, for example, is voltage. We have the voltage and we have the resistance, and we're trying to solve for current. Well, if we go back, our formula that solves for current looks like this guy. Current equals voltage divided by resistance, right? So if that's what we got, voltage and resistance, then all we have to do is divide 30, which is our voltage, by our resistance, which is 10,000. Now we could change this up. Let's say instead that we have a 20 volts and a resistance of 500 ohms. So if we have 20 volts and 500 ohms, we would say instead 20 volts divided by 500 ohms. And that, I can get out a calculator real quick. 20 divided by 500 would be 0.4 amps instead. So all I had to do was rearrange my original formula, which was resistance equals voltage divided by current, into current equals voltage divided by resistance. So in order to do that, all I had to do was multiply both sides by current. So current is over here, and then divide both sides by resistance. So we take resistance, put it over here, and then we have this guy. And then we just plug and chug. Voltage divided by resistance, 20 divided by 500. Does that make sense, Brandon? Or do you want me to do another example with something different? Because that was basically all that question was asking you. If you have 2 of the pieces of information, either voltage and resistance, or voltage and current, or current and resistance, you can solve for the 3rd component. You can solve for that 3rd part. So Ohm's law lets you solve for any of those 3 as long as you have the other 2. Okay, cool. Cool. We will be using Ohm's law quite a bit, and it gets more complicated. Right now, that's really easy when you only have 1 voltage and 1 current and 1 resistance. But when you start having things in series or things in parallel, Ohm's law becomes more complicated. So if you're going through the Brain Genie, which you should be able to do a little bit more on the Brain Genie now, you can see there are some more complicated calculations for Ohm's law. Parallel circuits actually have fractions, which tends to freak people out. So we'll explain calculations, more complicated Ohm law calculations next week. But for now, let's keep it simple. Ohm's law just as resistance equals voltage divided by current. All right, 17 people still chilling. Any other questions? How do you get voltage if you only have ohms? So if you don't know your current, you only have the resistance, you can't find voltage. if you don't know your battery source or your power source as well, then you can't find it. If you only have one part of a 3-variable equation, you can't solve it. Unless you have a specific example. That's as much as I can tell you on that. Yeah, you have to have 2 out of the 3. If you only have one, you can't solve it. Dog. Jesus. Oftentimes, if you're looking for it, sometimes it's on the circuit. Last 17 people should get Sparta bucks. For just hanging out and watching me? Not really. I mean, I don't even know if you're paying attention, Samara. All right? Okay, last one. How would I solve this one? Calculate the resistance of a filament of a 40-watt light bulb if it draws 3 amps when 120 volts are impressed across it. Okay, so that's trying to trick you up. You have all the information you need to solve for resistance. Let me see here. So you have your voltage and you have your current, 120 volts, 3 amps. You can really just use those two in order to solve for resistance. So let me reshare this. So your question was 3 amps and 120 volts. So that would be more like this question. So let's get rid of that for a second. So resistance equals voltage divided by current. So if you have 120 volts and 3 amps, 120 divided by 3, what, 612, no, 120 divided by 3, 40, right? So you should have a resistance of 40 ohms. Does that make sense, Brandon? Now there are other formulas you can use. For example, let's see here. So you said 40 watts and 120 volts. So let's say instead, let's come down here. So 40 watts equals power and 3 amps of current. So you can actually use this formula, which tells you power equals resistance times current squared. So this is another version of that same formula that we've seen. So typically we see power equals current times voltage, but it turns out that formula is the same as saying power equals resistance times current squared. So if we're solving for resistance, all we have to do is take current and divide both sides. So we can rearrange this to say power divided by current squared equals resistance. And so if we plug in our knowns, we say 40 watts divided by 3 squared. So 3 squared, of course, is 9. 40 divided by 9. 40 divided by 9. That is not the same at all. What's going on here? Okay. Now I messed something up. 3 amps. 40 watts. If it draws 3 amps, 120 volts are pressed across it. That should have worked, but for some reason it did not. Well, kid, I messed something up. Tell you what, Brendan, I'm going to get back to you on that question. Brendan, where did you see that question from? Was that from the Nearpod or was that from Brain Genie? What was that from? The last question on the Nearpod. Hang on, let me. Nearpod. Yeah, Brandon, get back to me on where you got that question from, because I'm not really sure. I'm missing some sort of context. It was on Nearpod. Was it from a quiz? Let me just go through it real quick. I didn't see that question in the Nearpod. I just went through it and I did not see a question like yours says, Brandon. Because the issue with that is if you have a 120 volt supply or a voltage and it's drawing 3 amps, your power wouldn't be 40. It would instead be 120 times 3, which is 360. So something's wrong with that question. And I'm looking through it right now and I don't see that. What's up, Pierce? What was the sound and wave test? The sound and the wave test, just copy and pasted it. I mean, I got the Nearpod up right now, and I'm not seeing it. The Brain Genie is not due until like after spring break. See you later, Tammy. Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay, Brandon, for that one, ignore wattage, okay? Ignore the wattage completely. Just use the 120 volts in the amps, okay? Completely ignore the wattage for that. I believe that'll get you the right answer. So that'll be 120 divided by 3. Yeah. Sorry about that. I don't know why it says 40 volts. I pulled that question from somewhere. That's wrong. Big time. Pierce, sorry, coming back to your question. The light and wave test was long ago. That was the first test we took this semester. So let's see how you did on that exam, Pierce. No, you never took it. Seems you were absent that day. So honestly, Pierce, since you never took it, I'll probably just exempt you from it. So it won't help you or hurt you at this point. I don't know. Did you take it? I don't think you did. Yeah, I'm just going to exempt you from that exam since you never took it, and I'm not able to implement tests online right now. So don't sweat it. It won't hurt you, but it won't help you either. So, and of course, exempt is definitely better than a 0. That's for sure. You know what? I can bring up Illuminate now. Let's just see if you actually took it. I mean, you might be down to take it, but you know, I can't implement things online, or I can't do tests online right now. That's not in our capabilities. At least not where I feel comfortable. Preach. I don't know what that means. Nina, what is my middle name? It's not physics. I promise you that. Okay, Brandon, current equals voltage divided by resistance. Okay? Current as voltage divided by resistance for Ohm's law. So if you want, I would make a little cheat sheet with Ohm's law with those 3 different formula ways. So just that little triangle right here, just take a picture of that or get a note card, write those 3 down, because those are the 3 different ways you'll see Ohm's law. Be careful about that, okay? Ethan, look at the due dates on the assignments, and you'll be caught up on everything. If there's a specific thing that you have a question about, just let me know. Pierce, to get to the Nearpod, all you have to do is go into assignments. Assignments on Teams, and there is literally an assignment that says Nearpod in it. Jack, you did take that exam. I don't know why you have a 0. I don't remember. Seems fishy. Were you cheating during that exam? Pierce, I'm just going to leave it as exempt because I already put it in there. You did pretty well on the exam. I don't know why it turned into a 0 for some reason. I must have accidentally did that. If you're even still in here, Pierce. Any last minute questions? I'm probably going to log off a couple minutes early, so hope this was helpful, kids. Sorry you're going to be stuck at home for probably the rest of the semester. It's looking like might be able to come back later in April, but I have a feeling that we probably won't. But fingers crossed. Fingers crossed coming back. Pierce. Yeah, Pierce, I don't know what's going on with your teams, but just go under teams, my third period assignments, and it should be there. See if you can get with Ethan or something. Ethan seems to get it. I don't know. Nina, you want to go to school? Yeah. Brandon, will I be at North Springs next year? Yep, signed my contract for next year, so I'll be there. All right, kiddos. Well, I'm going to log off. I will see you guys later. Oh, you clicked on the wrong physics font. Classic Pierce. Classic. All right, you guys have a great week. I'll see you next week.